Yes, certainly. This, in fact, I think I mistakenly said this was in Copenhagen last year. In fact, it was Bonn this year, at which one of my colleagues, Wolfgang Müller, who is from the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, which I also belong to, it's an environmental group that believes in looking after the environment rather than worrying about global warming, and we're here under their aegis. He was sitting next to one of the two Pakistani delegates at the discussions in Bonn, which were leading up to this conference here in Cancun. And the other delegate was up on the platform speaking and saying, oh, it's all terrible, we're doomed unless we shut down the economies of the West, all this kind of rubbish. And his colleague was sitting talking to Wolfgang Müller, not really realizing that we were on the other side of the case, and saying to me, no, actually, neither of us believe a word of this nonsense, but our government has told us to say it. And of course, we've seen this time and time again before, governments being inveigled into changing their view and becoming alarmist. India has just decided it's going to change its view and start accepting compulsory caps on the amount of carbon dioxide it emits. And it's doing this, but almost certainly because somebody has offered a very large sum of bribe to do that. We had it in Russia when the Russian Academy of Sciences got a report from Dr. Andrei Ilarionov, who was one of its key scientists in 2004, saying, look, we've had a conference at which we invited skeptics and we invited the British government to send its chief scientist to tell us why there was a problem. We had the skeptics as well. And the chief scientist, on realizing the skeptics were there, walked out. He couldn't answer our questions. So Ilarionov then made an impassioned speech saying that Sir David King, who was then the chief scientist, had let down the name of Britain, let down the name of Sir, and had certainly convinced him that there was no problem at all with global warming. Of course, King was trying to say the exact opposite. So then 6 months later, Tony Blair went to see Gaz Putin, the new Tsar of all the Russians at that time, and said to him, look, if you want to get entry into the World Trade Organization on highly favorable terms, we want you to shut Dr. Ilarionov and the Russian Academy of Sciences up, get them to change their view, and become a true believer in the new religion of global warming. Because that way, all of us in the governing class can, and I'm going to use a rude word here, can screw the ordinary people of the world. And, of course, duly, Putin changed his mind, ordered the Russian Academy to do the same. And these are the very nasty little games that are being played. But, of course, the more they play these games, the more they get caught out. Because, the great thing about bureaucracies is that most of the people who are in these bureaucracies are actually good people. They're trying to do a decent job. They can see that the maniacs who are in charge of the asylum are dishonest and corrupt.
And so they then leak info.
One of them has the courage to stand up and say so. And that's how we get the WikiLeaks. That's how we get the ClimateGate emails. That's how we get the story from the Pakistan minister. That's how I got Andrei Ilarionov to tell me personally what I've just told you.
Unbelievable. So you were told directly by the head of the Russian Academy of Sciences that this went on. That is a huge news story in and of itself, showing how they do this by hook and by crook. Now, shifting gears, we know these people love to play the part of savior of the earth. They're also control freaks. The White House science czar agrees with Ted Turner in writings that he wants to sterilize us with chemicals in the water, and he wants one-child policies. He's also told the Associated Press in the first press conference he gave almost 2 years ago that he wants to geoengineer the planet to save us from environmental degradation. And we know Bill Gates, who's pushing this, has bought the patents for it. So another way they want to tax us is for the world having to pay them to, quote, save us from the global warming. Then they get to play the part of, like, Superman, savior of the world from Lex Luthor, the boogeyman, Bizarro, and the rest of Superman's enemies. We have an Activist Post article, UN climate concern morphs into chemtrail glee club. And I've got all the different articles here where they're hopping around at the meeting trying to get rid of the UN treaty on geoengineering from decades ago. So what else? We covered the other official documents where they call for force relocating populations. I mean, what types of bizarre craziness are you hearing from these people?
Well, Well, of course, they are talking of forced relocations because of the imagined sea level rise, which also, incidentally, isn't happening. Sea level is rising at around 8 inches to 1 foot per century, as it has done, as best we can work it out, for the last century and a half. Before that, the records aren't too good. But we can tell from ice cores and geological records that over the last 11,400 years, sea level has risen by more than 400 feet. That's close to 4 feet per century. Now we're down to less than 1 foot per century. Ooh, I'm not very terrified, are you? So yes, they then propose all these monstrous geoengineering programs, putting giant umbrellas made of aluminum up between us and the sun in outer space, and every time a meteorite comes along, it punches a hole and tears the thing apart. They're thinking of using, in fact, putting more pollution back into the atmosphere, because the pollution stops the sun getting through and cools down the planet. Just one problem with that: they had overestimated the amount of cooling caused by that kind of pollution, and the figures were corrected last year in a paper by Gunnar Myhre, which is about to yet again change all the science, because it means that the warming effect of CO2, paradoxically, is a lot less than the UN had formerly thought. So we're getting all these people advocating more and more extreme, absurd, and above all expensive solutions. And also, of course, very immoral solutions. You know, the idea of saying to people, you can only have one child because we say so, is outrageous. What they should be doing, but of course they won't do because they don't want to share their riches, is to make the poor people of the world richer, because as populations become more prosperous and they come up above the poverty line, then their rate of breeding slows down all by itself. You don't have to have abortion, you don't have to have artificial contraception, you don't have to have Chinese soldiers with guns shooting one of the two twins if a mother is unlucky enough to have twins. None of that needs to happen. All you have to do is make people more prosperous. That's the kind of geoengineering that the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow is in favour of, and so is the Science and Public Policy Institute. We visited just yesterday a village only 10 miles from where I'm standing in the conference hall, and that village had no electricity, no sanitation, no water, no school until a Catholic charity came and gave it one, and no health care. They have absolutely nothing except each other. And the Mexican government is spending all this money on airy-fairy conferences while its own people are starving because they don't have basic amenities like electricity. That's the kind of geoengineering I want to see. Electricity for everyone. Clean water and safe sewage disposal for everyone.
Well, Lord Monckton,
for everyone. Healthcare for everyone. That's the kind of geoengineering I want to see, but you won't hear much of that among the lunatics at this conference here in Cancun. And I hope you're getting the flavour, Alex, that I'm becoming very angry at this unwillingness of the world's governing class to listen to the needs of ordinary people around the world. It's bad enough that they spit in the face of democracy and try and take it away. It's bad enough that our freedom and our money are being taken away, but that they also kick the poor in the teeth while pretending to help them. That seems to me to be something for which they ought to try for a very long time, somewhere uncomfortable after this life, if not in it.
Well, that was my next point. I mean, Ted Turner, all of them just write books, give speeches dripping with venom, hating the third world. But even the Royal Commission in '49 in England found if the third world was industrialized, they would get a negative population growth, just like has happened in Japan, Italy, England, the United States. Not only does it stabilize, for every 2 adults, man and woman, they start having 1.3, 1.4 children, that the West is actually dying. And the UN admits the third world's going to stabilize 2020 at about 8,200,000,000. So they know by deindustrializing the first world, by freezing industrialization in the developing world, that it's a death sentence and it will hurt the environment. They don't care. They want to control everything. They are villains. Your comment.
Well, I'm afraid you're understating it, Alex. I mean, I don't often say this to you, but really, I am so angry with these people because of their utter lack of concern, lack of thought, and lack of the use of reason. What is it that differentiates us from all the other creatures in the visible creation? It is that we have the ability to use reason. And the entire governing class of the world, certainly that part of it which is assembled in large numbers here in Cancun, they are all as though they are in a lunatic asylum, as though they are simply totally unable to use their minds at all. And of course, this is because they know, increasingly they know, that this whole climate rubbish is nonsense. But what they're doing is they are exploiting it, they are profiting by it, they're making billions out of it, and they're making billions at our expense, and worst of all, at the expense of the third world. They have no concept.
Stay there. Final segment. We're going to talk about how we stop these monsters. Yeah, there's a woman in the night starving to death, and it's well documented that these carbon cuts of energy will kill over 1 billion people in the next decade. We're going back to Lord Christopher Monckton to talk about how we stop these people, and hopefully in the next few weeks or after Christmas we can get him on to talk about briefly the aftermath of this criminal consortium meeting down in Cancun. They're routed, but they're dangerous, and they're still taking over our societies at the local level. Before we go back to Lord Monckton, silver's way up, gold's way up. Midas Resources bought the silver and gold when it was lower. They're selling it to you when it's higher at the old low price. But Ted is running out of those silver dollars and silver half dollars and the francs and sovereigns at the lower price. You've got to tell them it's the radio special. I don't have time to get into all of it. Give them a call. Get into silver and gold today. 800-686-2237. 800-686-2237. My job's easy. I promote what I believe in. I've been telling you buy gold and silver for over a decade when silver was $5 an ounce, when gold was $260 an ounce. Did I steer you right? Get into silver and gold today. 800-686-2237. Tell them it's the Alex Jones special to get the lower prices. The regular prices are great. We got about 4 minutes left, Lord Monckton, down there at the conference. Any other observations? How do we stop these people? What's the time frame on when we'll know if they were successful at this larcenous meeting?
Right. In the next 2 days, we should hear whether or not they've come to the agreement I expect them to come to, and I've outlined the main points of that. Huge expansion of bureaucracy, huge expansion of taxation of the West by the UN, huge growth in the Secretariat of the UN Framework Convention, which now has its own army, it has its own troops, effectively. You see them now wherever you go, these UN security people who are pretty nasty types. They're all ex-mercenaries as far as I can see. You know, this is growing into a kind of super state which exists wherever it decides to land and hold a conference. The way we stop it, I think, is by the US and one or two other leading countries, once we have a Republican president again who starts taking interest in standing up for the US rather than trying to destroy it. And I hope you'll forgive me if I say that about your present president, but it is very sad to see what he's been doing.
Well, he's not our president. He's a total globalist miscreant, but go ahead.
Well, so what I'm saying is I think that what we now need to do is for America needs to leave the UN. Leave the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, leave the IPCC on the ground that they are all fraudulent, corrupt, and unduly expensive, and that American taxpayers can no longer be trusted can no longer have the money taken from them, and the UN be trusted to spend it. I think we've got to take that all away, leave it. We've got to found a new organization called the United Democracies, in which only democratic countries will be allowed to participate, and the only people who will be allowed to speak for various nations at the United Democracies and its meetings will be people whom we, the people of the democratic world, have elected to represent us. Because one of the big dangers, Alex, as the supranational organizations like this grim, secretive secretariat of the UN Framework Convention, the danger is not one of these supranational, cross-border, powerful, ever better funded organizations is democratically elected. So every time we pass power from us to them, we're passing power from elected hands to unelected hands. That must stop. Article 1, Section 1 of your Constitution gives all legislative power to the elected Congress. Nobody else can make laws or impose taxes on America except those who America elect. Let's that be the rule at international level as well.
Absolutely, Lord
No
Monckton.
more taxation without representation. No more legislation without representation.
You've been very gracious. Hopefully you can join us right before Christmas, in the aftermath, or after Christmas, or in the new year, to let us know what happened. We're blessed to have you there, and I really appreciate you spending time with us. Good luck down there. Be safe.
Real pleasure, and God bless America.
All right. God bless you. Back live tomorrow with Rand Paul.